All right. We are live on Facebook and elsewhere. This will be available on YouTube as well. I am delighted to be here with Kaira Jewel Lingo, the author of a new book from Parallax Press called We Were Made for These Times, 10 Lessons on Moving Through Change, Loss, and Disruption. A timely book and timely teaching. So Kaira Jewel, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, John, for having me.
I thought maybe we could begin with you telling me and our audience here just a little bit about yourself. I know you probably don't enjoy talking about yourself a whole lot, but just give us briefly some of your background. It's in your book, but for those who haven't read your book, give us something about where you grew up and what have you been doing throughout your adult life. I mean, you have a very unique story that I want people to sort of understand at the outset.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Chicago in a Christian family religious order. So families that were kind of choosing a monastic-like style of life to be of service. And so there were community development projects and human development projects that this organization set up in every time zone of the world. And so we lived very simply and had common childcare where adults took turns taking care of all of us, and several hundred people in that old insurance building in Chicago on the north side near the lake. Anyway, international community, and I was born into an interracial family, my mother being Black, my father white. And so there was just a lot of going against the stream from early on in my life. And that's actually how the Buddha describes his teaching, as going against the stream. So I kind of felt I was called to be of service at a young age. Like I was on board with that trajectory of the community, and really appreciated the spiritual container that all of our life unfolded in. So we'd wake up at 5 a.m. and go down for daily office every morning. Even as children, there was prayers and incense. It was dark, candlelight. That was something that really I learned about opening the day with purpose from a very young age. And we did a lot of singing and conversations, and really, talking to each other, listening to each other, and trying to find meaning in the small daily events. So we left that community when I was 14. I went to high school in Atlanta. I did a year in Brazil as an exchange student. Went to college at Stanford, and did a year at Howard University as Black students from all around over the country had kind of an exchange program with Howard, and continued to go to Brazil to do research. Did my thesis and master's thesis on capoeira, an Afro-Brazilian martial art that I learned in Brazil, and then really was clear as I was finishing university that I really wanted more of a spiritual training that I knew hadn't quite happened in the academic training. And so I decided to travel for a year. I went to India and Egypt and Ethiopia, and anyway, I ended up doing the Plum Village summer retreat in France with Thich Nhat Hanh, and really kind of set out on that year knowing I wanted to find a teacher and a community. Having grown up in a community, I think there was this, ever since we left, I was looking for community. So as soon as I saw Thich Nhat Hanh Thai, I recognized that's my teacher. and canceled the rest of my trip and stayed there. And at the end of 4 months, I thought, oh, why don't I do this all the time? And so I had this wish to become a nun. I went home and worked, and actually worked with Vincent Harding at Iliff School of Theology. Was one of my part-time jobs, supporting his Gandhi Hamer King Center for Religion and Democratic Renewal. But I went back to Plum Village, became a nun, a Buddhist nun at the age of 25, and was a nun for 15 years. So when I lived in France, lived in Germany, lived in Southern California in our monasteries there as a Buddhist nun and teacher and practitioner and student, and left, disrobed when I was about 40. And in the last 7 or 6 years since I disrobed, I've been teaching as a lay teacher, different parts of the world, mostly now in the US, retreats and online, and have also become a Dharma teacher, not just in the Zen lineage of Thich Nhat Hanh, but also in the Vipassana Insight lineage as well, through Spirit Rock Meditation Center.
No, thank you. And a visual image that I have from having read your book and knowing some of this story about you personally, the visual that sticks with me is that I know that as a nun, your head was shaved.
Yes.
But then more recently, you actually tell us in your book that you had to start learning how to do online dating. And, the one and the other, it's really hard to kind of picture them going together in the same human being, but that's who you are.
It's like different lifetimes, have existed in one lifetime.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, I wanted to start out with, you telling us something about you. And then I want to talk a little bit about your book, of course. We Were Made for These Times. And then I want to sort of conclude by having you at least give me some advice on how we can fix the world, if you don't mind. But first, I mean, your book deals with how to face our grief. I mean, it's a book that clearly was written in the pandemic, or at least you have taken the teachings that you hold and adapted them to these times that we're living in now in a special way. And so you talk about how we meet our grief, how we can meet our grief. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So this is a time of very understandable grief. Even before the pandemic, just the rate of destruction of life on planet Earth is unprecedented and preventable. The growing wealth gap, which really has skyrocketed since the Gulf Wars and 9/11 has just really created very tenuous situations and democracy in this country as well. This has really is really in peril. And so there's a lot of disintegration is happening, and a lot of trust is eroding in the public. Kind of what used to be more what was dependable for some generations, or at least maybe for some populations, we could say. And so there needs to be space to grieve the loss that's happening, because if we don't face what's happening, and really the only thing you can feel when you see ice caps melting that will never come back. They won't come back, anytime in our, millennium or eon. All you can feel is grief when you know that 300 species go extinct every minute. You can't respond with anything but grief. I mean, these things can't be undone. And so if we feel the grief, which is like a layer of ice, right? It's a blockage. If we feel it, if we allow it, if we face it, that we are doing this, we are a part of this species that's destroying the very substance of, life that supports us, sustains us. That blockage, that ice, if you want to think of it that way, it starts to break open. So there's something under that grief, which is our ability to act. If we ignore our grief, which is very also human and natural, we don't want to face what's happening. We'd rather be distracted in all the things that we get busy with, and the ways we have of escaping the harshness, right? But if we escape from the grief, then there's nothing that can be done. We can't access our inherent care and ability to move and change things. But if we face the grief, like that's the first step. You have to turn and face the grief. And under that, if we face it, if we allow it, it's scary. But once we feel into it, we realize it's workable. We can hold it. There's something that can hold it. Then underneath that grief is a whole well of care, of responsiveness that gets really that comes online, that becomes available to us. So that's why it's so important to turn towards the grief. This is the wisdom that our dear Joanna Macy, a Buddhist scholar, philosopher, and environmental activist, has really offered us in a lot of her work. It's just, we need to tend to the grief, because that's the doorway to access what we actually have capacities to respond to what's happening, but they're locked behind this door of grief.
Yeah, thanks. Related to that, and a couple of chapters later in We Were Made for These Times, you talk about something that really helped me and spoke to me very keenly, and you call it caring for strong emotions. I have said to friends in the last few months and quite recently that during the pandemic, and because of the pandemic, I'm sure, I have found myself crying more often, and I have found myself getting angry really easily.
Mm-hmm.
I think my affect is usually pretty calm, and people think I'm, chill, but underneath, not so, and increasingly not so.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess part of what I appreciated in reading your book and the chapter on caring for strong emotions was that I felt that I'm not unusual. There's comfort in that. Mm-hmm. But could you tell us something about caring for strong emotions, and maybe even give us, if you can, give us a little spiritual practice, give us something that we can do.
Sure. Thank you for naming that, John. Also, just, there's a line from, I think it's the Avatamsaka Sutra, this Mahayana text, where someone says, because the world is sick, I am sick. Like, we aren't separate from all of the craziness, all of the breakdown that's happening around us. So it's important to see that, this isn't about personal weakness or we're too sensitive. Like we are going through something no other generation has gone through. And so, and then you have the pandemic on top of that. So really giving compassion to ourselves for the total naturalness. And I mean, it's sane to react with stronger, higher, more intense emotions as the world starts to, really fall apart in, bit by bit around us. So there is it's, the Surgeon General said the rates of young people coming to ER rooms for suicide or attempts or self-harm is skyrocketed since the pandemic. I mean, it's just, people are deeply suffering. And so we're human if this is what's happening for us too. We're part of this human web. And so what's beautiful is all of these emotions that can be so painful and disruptive. They're in each one of us. We all have all the same, call them seeds in Buddhist psychology, these potentialities that rest in the lower level of our mind. And if they're stimulated, they come up and they form, they create, they manifest as an energy field, which is that feeling of being angry or being sad or being depressed or being in despair, being frightened or anxious. And so all of these emotions can be worked with. They are organic. They arise and they pass away. And they respond to other energies. So they can, everything in the storehouse of our mind can be cultivated or not cultivated. If we don't cultivate something, it will weaken. If we do cultivate something, it will grow stronger. So we can have a direct effect on how likely it is for these states to arise or not. So when anger arises, we can know that anger is arising. Mindfulness, being aware of our body, being aware of our feelings, the sensations in our body, the changes in our temperature or tension or level of activation, all of that can be known by mindfulness. And mindfulness is always non-judgmental. It does not have a preference for what arises in our mind. It just wants to be aware. So if anger is there, mindfulness is happy to be aware of anger. If despair is there, mindfulness, oh, hey, that's despair. I want to be close to the despair. I want to know the despair and be there for the despair. If anxiety is arising, hello, anxiety. I'm here for you. So mindfulness is friendly. It's kind. And it pays attention to whatever is arising. And so we can feel what is anger? What are the symptoms, the expressions of anger? How do we know when we're angry? So then we can notice, okay, I'm tensing my belly, I'm clenching my jaw, I'm getting heat in my face, or my heart's beating faster, or my mind is narrowing, or you can notice a lot of different effects of anger. And then you can bring kindness to yourself. You can breathe a deeper breath. If you notice your heart's beating faster, you can take a deeper breath. Breathing in, I know I'm angry. Breathing out, I'm here for my anger. So we don't leave our anger alone. We don't let anger take over the scene. So anger is just one thing in us. Just because it's there doesn't mean it has to be everything that's coming up. We can call up wise and stable parts of ourselves, not to suppress our anger. we want to listen to our anger. Anger has actually very important things to say to us that we really need to hear, because there's wisdom in anger too. Like, this should not be happening, right? Or there's people should be being protected. They shouldn't be being harmed, or species, or, the planet. All these things are, that righteous kind of anger. So that we need to listen to what our anger is telling us, but we need to accompany our anger. And anxiety the same, and sadness the same. And mindfulness is very good at being there with that difficult emotion. And as soon as a difficult, strong emotion is met by the energy of mindfulness, there is an easing, a soothing that happens in our nervous system, because that painful experience isn't by itself. It has been met by another energy. So just if this is the strong emotion and this is mindfulness, mindfulness recognizes the strong emotion and it comes close to it. It wants to be, usually we're like, oh, go away. I don't want that part of me there. Or that part just takes over and it becomes everything that we are. But there's a third path that's sort of a middle path of those two extremes. And so mindfulness is going to, say, hey, I see that you're here. Anger, I'm here for you. I'm going to hold you. I'm going to be there for you and understand you and give you kindness. And that helps anger to actually begin to release and show what's beneath anger. Usually there's more than just that emotion that's on the surface. So anger can begin to talk to us and give us insight into, there may be sadness under the anger. There may be deep love that's trying to express itself. There may be an understanding of how connected we are. And so then we can get to that insight of what is really the most true thing about this, whatever it is that we're upset about. And that begins to give us many more possibilities for how to meet the situation. We may very well need to speak up and speak strongly and be very fierce. But because we've met the firing part of our emotion with mindfulness, we're now free to act with clarity and with strength and without reactivity to really respond to the situation. And so much is possible when we're bringing all of ourselves online. And that's what calmly, lovingly, mindfully meeting our strong emotions allows us to do. Frees up all of the things that are already in us that can help us really resolve the situation more intelligently.
Thank you. And as we think about a lot of us are already, yearning and thinking about life after the pandemic, because we want to find a life after the pandemic, and we're hoping that this period of time that we're living in is going to transition into something more generous and open. As we think about that, we also think about, a reset, like pushing the reset button on the appliance, so you can start over again. If we were to start over, if we could find a way to do things differently now as we begin again, what is the answer that you advise people who can't figure out in their lives what to do in terms of the inner life and the outer life? The mindful, contemplative kind of practice. Do I need to pray more? Do I need to sit more? Do I need to protest more? Do I need to be out in my neighborhood more? How you must have people who ask you this kind of thing all the time. How do I balance these things in my life? Because sometimes one option feels futile, and then sometimes the other one feels futile. You're not sure if you're making progress. How do you know if you're making progress?
Mhm, mhm. Well, A.J. Muste says there is no way to peace. Peace is the way. So there is no way to progress. Progress is the way. So it means we only need to take care of this moment. Taking care of this moment is the best way to take care of the next and the next and the next. So if we want progress, we need to be deeply here, to be present for what is here. And if that's our prayer, our meditation, our inner life, then that's what that is. And if that's our protest, if that's our standing up for what we believe in the world, then that's where we practice. That's progress is happening on both fronts if we are showing up fully. So those two things are two sides of the same coin. If we are deepening, if we're giving our wholehearted energy to growing our minds, our hearts, to deepening our love, to connecting, to waking up to our interconnectedness with others, that has a direct influence on how we will interact with others in the world, how we will stand up for what we see as is happening that's unjust. And if we're deeply present and dwelling in our bodies, in our minds, if we are living peace in our work in the world, that brings a deep effect into our inner life as well. Our inner life has more meaning if we're manifesting peace in our work in the world. So I think as it comes to how we, press the reset button, it's so important that we, whatever action that we take, that it comes from compassion and wisdom. The statues of Avalokiteshvara, the great being of compassion, the Bodhisattva of great compassion, Kuan Yin is another name. She has thousands of arms, and on each arm there's a hand, and there's an eye in the palm of each hand, and that eye is the eye of wisdom. So her actions aren't superfluous. Her actions, they land, they do the right thing because they are motivated, they're guided by the wisdom that's in them. So I think that's where having a grounded practice in our inner lives is so key, because whatever we do in our outer lives, it will be much more effective because it's coming from deep wisdom. Just, a quick story. Adam and I, we watched a documentary about Howard Thurman. It's on YouTube, free. It's Back Against the Wall, just an hour long about his life. And it was so interesting to learn that he wasn't out. So this was a Black theologian, for those who don't know, who wrote many books and was kind of a mystic. But he was also the advisor to Dr. King and others during the civil rights movement, and had a very profound personal contemplative practice of nonviolence. So they said in the documentary, he wasn't on the front lines marching in the streets, but he was doing very profound interior practice that Dr. King and other leaders of the movement would come to him for sustenance, for guidance, for for, resourcing themselves in their action in the world. And I thought that was just, I hadn't heard that piece of how the contemplative was really supporting the action in the world. So I just think, those two things, internal, external, they go together. And we want to make sure that our action is guided by that eye of wisdom and compassion.
And you quoted A.J. Muste before. Isn't A.J. Muste also the one who, when he was asked, why is he doing this protest, that he said something like, I'm not doing this protest necessarily thinking it's going to change the world, but to make sure that the world doesn't change me.
I love that story so much.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. That has always stuck with me.
Yeah.
I can't imagine a better way of saying it.
Yeah.
Another way in which I think that a lot of us think about a reset is a reset that is going to be a sort of a necessity, which is related to climate change and related to the pandemic both, which is that our mobility is changed, perhaps forever, to the good, surely to the good, but also in a way that is unfamiliar to many of us. And I know some of your background from having read your book, and I know this is true for you. I mean, you've traveled the world more than anyone I know, probably, since childhood. And even, 15 years as a Buddhist nun, you were traveling the world. It's not as if you were just sitting somewhere in a monastery. What do you think about, and sorry, and then I meant to say, and I know that now you spend a lot of time online. I mean, you're a teacher through platforms like what we're using right now. What do you think about this change in our lives? What do you think about this kind of change going forward? And how is it to the good? But yet, what are the cautions that we should follow?
Yeah. Well, just reading some of the writers on the climate crisis. I mean, to not live addicted to fossil fuels means we are going to need to accept lives that are much more local, that are not so dependent on so much travel, and that also can facilitate things like growing our own food, which is going to be, I think, a skill that really needs to be brought back to more and more of us, taking care of our local place, growing our food, and taking care of our local communities, being together, because it's just not sustainable to I mean, unless, maybe we find some super sustainable way to do air travel that doesn't rely on fossil fuels, but I haven't heard of anything coming down the pipe. But there is this one of the benefits of the pandemic has been people who didn't have access to certain groups and teachings and practices now have almost 24-hour a day options of this group or that thing or that presentation, because everything has switched to online, and so that could be something that could really support us going forward, of how we could stay connected and find ways to do more remote work, more connecting online rather than traveling, and I think, I mean, just Greta Thunberg's example of taking the boat, of sailing across the Atlantic, and, really being determined not to take fossil fuel transport. It's so inspiring. I mean, it's not something that I know we can all follow in her footsteps, at this moment. But I remember as a nun, Ty was very, very practical. When he would learn things, he would be like, okay, we're going to have no car days. And so one day a week, we would have a no car day. We would not drive. And we already were sharing, like for 50 monastics, we might have had 3 cars. So we were already very much using much less fossil fuels because we just had much simpler lives. But even then, we wouldn't go shopping. We wouldn't go on trips. And we would encourage everyone to have a no car day. And we had a whole campaign where thousands of people were saying, well, once a week, I'm not going to drive. And so that kind of consciousness, we can go more and more in that direction. How to live less and less dependent on fossil fuels, to find other means, if we do need to get around, what are other means that can support that aren't so harmful? And I know it's complicated because I know also with even batteries for electric cars, what's involved in extracting a lot of these chemicals and minerals and substances from the earth can also create great deal of disruption to local economies and indigenous peoples and the biosphere. So it's not like just everyone should go out and get their own electric car. I think really thinking of how to really bring in mass public transport that works, that's based on renewables, that will help us. There's just no reason why the US can't have a really high functioning train, high speed train system like in Europe, or China has this, so we can create ways to get around that don't harm the planet and that don't mean all of us consuming more as individuals. But we also, I think, need to create more enlivened local communities where we care for our land, we care for each other, and we connect with each other in other places online. I think that is sort of what's called for us now.
A reset of bicycles and vegetable gardens and community fairs, and it'd be wonderful.
We visited the Eco Village at Ithaca in New York. There's a 30-year-old Ithaca Eco Village, I think, near Cornell University. They have houses that are completely carbon zero emitting. They have a heat pump, and they have such tight insulation, no warmth escapes, and it's heated by body heat from humans more than anything else. And then a very good circulation, ventilation. But can you imagine a home that is net zero in carbon emissions?
Yeah.
That's so inspiring to me. That can be done.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that is our future. Well, we just have 2 or 3 minutes left. And in the 2 or 3 minutes, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I have to ask you, you're someone whose life was profoundly changed by Thich Nhat Hanh. And you say early in your book that at the age of 23, you realized he was your teacher. Mm-hmm. And of course, he passed last week. Could you just leave us with a thought about Ty?
I'm so grateful to see an example of a life so fully and deeply and lovingly, wisely lived. Like this, the title of my book, We Were Made for These Times, someone commented, there's a confidence in that title. But to me, looking at Ty, seeing his example should give all of us confidence. That is possible. It is possible to live in that awakened way in this human form. Each of us has the seed of awakening, of Christ nature, of Buddha nature, of God in us. We all can realize our highest potential, that each of us comes into this world. I think our purpose really is to realize this. And it is possible. And we can see in people like Thai and other people like the Dalai Lama, or, I think Pope John Francis is one of those people. Pope Francis, sorry. It's possible. Mother Teresa, we can live in a deeply awakened way where our hearts are growing more and more to include all beings in our love, in our care, in our compassion. And, he was a human being. He was a human being just like us. And he really taught us as his students, you have to find Thai in yourself. Don't look to me, look to yourself. And he said that over and over again. It's you have it in you. And so we all can, it's like Thai passing away, Thich Nhat Hanh passing away. He's giving us all a download. Okay, let's really do this now for the rest of our lives. That is our work, to let unfold the incredible luminous beauty that is each of our true nature. And it's possible. We were made for these times. We are Buddhas to be. We are Christs in process.
Thank you. And thank you, Kaira Jewel Lingo, for being with us. She is the author of We Were Made for These Times, 10 Lessons on Moving Through Change, Loss, and Disruption. From Parallax Press, there it is. It is reviewed on our website, spiritualityandpractice.com.
Thank you for that review, John. Really
of course. I hope that people watching this will ask their public library to have the book, and I hope they will go to their independent and local bookseller to buy one if they are able. Thank you, Kaira Jewel, for being with us. It's been such a pleasure. And I hope that people will get to know you more. We need what you have to teach us.
Thank you so much, John. So grateful for this time with you.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.